It is it's quite emotional for Andrea and myself, this report, and so we're thankful to be here. We're thankful for the Lord, what He has allowed us to be able to do in Paraguay this past 7 years. And as I was trying to think, how in the world am I going to do a mission report, a final mission report, especially trying to cover 7 years. It's hard enough to cover 1 year in just about 30 minutes, much less 7 years. And so I want to share with you just some highlights of what's taken place in Paraguay this past 7 years that we've been working there, as well as some of the things that's happened this past year. And as you see on the screen, this is our 7th time to come and give a mission report. And so you can see those title screens that I've put up each time that you've been here and you've seen those different reports and heard me talk about the different things that are taking place in Paraguay. And indeed, it is exciting work. And as always, I like to start with Acts chapter 14. Acts chapter 14, verse 26 and 27, because that is the precedent for these type of reports. I'm not the first one to do this, and the missionaries that have come before me are not the first ones to do this. Paul and Barnabas were the first ones to do something like this. And it says in Acts chapter 14, verse 26 and 27, it says, "From there they sailed to Antioch, where they had been commended to the grace of God for the work which they had completed. Now when they had come and gathered the church together, they reported all that God had done with them, and that He had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles." That's exactly what has happened in the work in Paraguay. God has opened the door of faith to the folks down there, and used Andrew, myself, and other missionaries to be able to do that work. Now the first and most important thing, and the whole reason we do this, brethren, is so that more souls can be added to the Lord's kingdom. The whole reason we go out from this building, whether it be across the street, whether it be across your neighborhood, or to the next town, or the next state, or even across oceans, the whole point is to spread the extraordinary news about an extraordinary man, Jesus Christ, and tell them about eternal life that is offered by the Father. And so, over the last 7 years, there have been lots of people added to the church, lots of people. And I wanted to just put these up here and let you see these pictures. More than 70 baptisms have taken place in the last 7 years that Andrew and I have been involved in the work. Now, we didn't do those baptisms ourselves. This is including our mission team, our brethren that we worked with. But for 7 years, from the time we started working there have been over 70 baptisms through all the different Bible studies. And here you can see these pictures of these precious souls that are being added to the Lord's kingdom in this past 7 years. And I thought you might like to see that and be encouraged by the work that has taken place there in Paraguay. And you can recognize a lot of the faces that are on there that we've given over the last 7 years and even reports before us. This past year, Marcos Dominguez was baptized. He is the now husband of our sister in Christ, Silvina Jimenez. And he has been coming to church with her and studying with several other brethren. I've had an opportunity to study with him a little bit. And he was baptized about the time I was here. We were here last year. And so I don't know if you saw this picture of this baptism or not, but this is one of our first baptisms we had this past year. And then also Ariel Fariña. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Ariel in a minute because his story is very important. So I'll hold off on that in just a moment. But Ariel was baptized recently. And then Ivana Ortiz was actually rebaptized. Ivana was baptized 2 or 3 years ago. She's part of, you see her family there. And Mabel was one of Andrea's students, English students, as well as Ivana. And Mabel was baptized, and Ivana, and then Sammy. In fact, that's a picture of when Sammy was baptized. But Ivana, after a few years, thought more about her baptism, thought more about her life, and thought that perhaps maybe she didn't do it exactly for the right reasons. And she wanted to make sure it was right. And so she was rebaptized. And there her friend Alex, and our brother in Christ, Alex, was teaching her. And this is an exciting one for us. Priscilla Santander was baptized. Priscilla came to us several years ago. Her daughter was looking for a church, trying to understand a little bit more about tithing. That's a big issue in Paraguay. And so Alba Harden started a conversation with her on Facebook. And so they came to the church to see what the church was about. and then they wound up coming. Well, Priscilla has been very faithful in attendance, but she was never baptized because her parents were in ministry of some denomination, and she came to the realization that if she was baptized in the Church of Christ, she would be condemning her parents. And so she refused to be baptized, thought that her baptism she had was right. Of course, we never extended the right hand of fellowship to her because according to what we understood in her baptism, it wasn't correct. And so recently she is studying with Eliezer Perez, our missionary there, and she finally came to the realization that if her parents had had the opportunity to obey the gospel in the form that she's allowed to, and that she is responsible for her own soul, then she finally came to the realization that she needed to be baptized. So we praise God that happened. And in the meanwhile, she brought a friend with her, Pablo Martinez, who was also baptized, and they are now members of the San Lorenzo Church of Christ. And so, brethren, just as Jesus said in Luke 10:2, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray that the Lord of harvest send out laborers into his field. Brethren, there is still a lot of work to do in Paraguay. Paraguay has had American mission teams there American missionaries since 2003. And so there's been a lot of work done, but there's still a lot more work to do. And that's because Paraguay, some of you might know, some of you might not, is a fairly large city. The Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, Asunción, has in the metropolitan area over 2 million people in it. There's over 7 million in the country. And out of that 7 million in the population there, only 150 faithful Christians can be counted. Now, there's been a lot more have been baptized. There's over 200 that have been baptized, but several of them have fallen away. Some of them didn't take faith seriously, or other issues that happens through, over 12 years of work. But there are 3 congregations that are laboring there now. 3 congregations that are self-supporting and self-governing and self-propagating. And that's the most important thing, that the church has been firmly established in Paraguay. And that's what's important as long as we continue. This picture was just recently taken as that fact our last day that Andrew and I were with the brethren there at Avenida Sacramento. That's the congregation where Andrew and I labored these last several years. Here you can see a picture inside there in our facility. Some of you know this place. Some of you have been to Avenida Sacramento and worked with us in Paraguay. And some of you out here are going again this summer. And so this might pique your interest in some of the things that you're seeing here. It's a wonderful work, a wonderful congregation, lovely souls, and we're obviously going to miss it very much. But we had a lot of good work and a lot of good things happen there. This is the other congregation, the San Lorenzo congregation, is a town just outside of Asunción. And this is their facility where they're worshiping. And then there's also a third congregation, the Centro, or that means downtown congregation, which is led by Jorge Vera. And that congregation is actually the oldest congregation in Asunción and is still going. So between those 3 congregations, there's over 150, almost 200 faithful Christians that are attending and we're laboring. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, where in the world is Paraguay? You know, Paraguay just recently was on Jeopardy as one of their little signs there, and I knew every single one of the questions. I thought it was interesting, and I was surprised that even the contestants knew it. So some people, Paraguay is one of those countries that they like to use to trip up people, because when you say, where's Paraguay, most people have no idea. Well, it's in South America. It is 4,500 miles from West Palm Beach, Florida. So it's a long way. It's on the other side of the earth. We see the southern hemisphere. And so right in the middle of South America, here's another map to give you a better idea. You see that red dot there? That's Paraguay in the southern hemisphere in South America. And then, you know, how big is Paraguay? Well, here to give you an idea just exactly how big the country is. It's about the size of California. And I think it's funny because Paraguayans, you know, they can drive from one side of their country to the other side in about 5, 6, 7 hours. And so whenever they want to come and visit the United States, and they'll fly into New York and say, hey, we want to go to Los Angeles. We'll just drive over to Los Angeles. And they don't realize that's a much longer drive than just 5 or 6 hours across the country. So they realize the United States is much, much larger. The work in Paraguay started actually in the 1970s. Very interesting story. A brother in Christ went down to Chile and evangelized several of the Chileans there, and one of them was Luis Ramirez, and Luis was commissioned by this preacher that went to Chile to go to Paraguay and establish the church. And in the process, he wound up going via Uruguay and wound up meeting some other brethren, Carlos and Maria Catagnelo and Juan Odila Uriola. And over the course of several years, they came together and established the church in Paraguay in the 1970s. And between the years 1974 and 1982, they had 30 baptisms. Also during that time frame, a congregation in Austin, Texas, the Northside congregation, which now is a different name, and unfortunately it's a diminishing or a dying congregation. I actually had the opportunity to preach there whenever I was attending school at Southwest, and they still remembered the missionaries and remembered their involvement in Paraguay. But they got involved in the work and began supporting the preachers there. And then over the course of time, they commissioned the Forrest McDonald family to go down there in the 1980s. So Forrest McDonald went down with his family and wound up starting another congregation and continuing the work that Northside Church of Christ had started. And now this really actually goes even further back to the 1960s. In the 1960s, a group of graduates from the Abilene Christian University got together and formed a mission team that went to Sao Paulo, Brazil. And that work grew, and they wound up going out and planting more churches, and they kind of came up with a plan, with a strategy, if you will, of how to plant churches. And that evolved into Continent of Great Cities, which now I believe is just called Great Cities Missions. Some of you might recognize this name. This is where Chris Fry is laboring now with great cities, as well as Enoch Rinks, who was one of the missionaries that served in Paraguay. And it's through that effort and through their ideology that they started targeting different places in South America to plant churches. And that's where Chris and Enoch and all of them got involved and went to great cities, and just training through them and through their help was able to go down and establish the church in Paraguay. So there's a lot of connections there, and that's that first work. The Avenida Sacramento Church of Christ started whenever Chris and his family and then the other missionaries went down there in 2003 and served up until 2010. Chris stayed a year into the time that we came down whenever we started, and to help us get acclimated. And then we formed the second wave, if you will, the Asunción mission team. We like to call ourselves Team Apollos because the Bible says in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 6, that Paul planted and Apollos watered and God gives increase. Well, Avenida Sacramento was already established, and so when we formed our mission team to go down there, we wanted to water the congregation, if you will, to help them grow, to help them become more established and to be able to stand on their own. And so the team served up until just this past December, whenever we finally finished all connections with the Asunción mission team and the Avenida Sacramento Church of Christ. This is the original building, the location where it was on Avenida Sacramento. It was a rented facility where Chris and them started the congregation, and then a few years later they purchased this property where we labor now, where the congregation is now, still on Avenida Sacramento, just about 2 blocks down the road. And so this facility is owned by the Paraguayans, and so they have full control over this facility. They manage it, and they pay the bills and take care of it, and that goes in with what we were talking about being self-sustaining, self-governing, and self-propagating. Now, when you talk about mission work and talk about being a missionary, what are we talking about? A missionary is nothing more than a normal Christian. Any other Christian, we're all missionaries. And so a missionary is simply a person who preaches and teaches. And that's what Jesus commanded us to do in the Great Commission. He said, go forth and baptize them, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And so that's what we're supposed to do. And that's exactly what we did this last 7 years. Almost every single month, I was preaching either at Avenida Sacramento or the San Lorenzo Church of Christ. And I say every month because in Paraguay we have a rotation. The men, there's about, up to now, there's about 10 men that are in a rotation to preach. And so every Sunday there's a different brother in the pulpit that is preaching in the same way in San Lorenzo. So there's this constant rotation of men. So we would either be in Avenida Sacramento preaching or in San Lorenzo at times over this past 7 years. Excuse me. And then teaching. Well, we did lots and lots of Bible studies. Anything from personal Bible studies, evangelistic Bible studies, to teaching classes, to including the Bible Academy and everything in between. So we spent our time preaching and teaching. Now, when Andrea and I came to you in 2009, the year before we moved to Paraguay, we were presenting to you some of our goals, the things that we wanted to accomplish just in the next year. So in that first year, we wanted to get all of our support raised. We actually didn't have all of our support until literally just about 2 weeks before we moved to Paraguay. God provides, let me tell you, through lots of prayers that I'll never forget. We were still quite a bit out from having our full support, and we received a phone call one night and said, "How much are you lacking, brother?" And I told him thinking, usually most people give a portion of that. He said, "Well, we'll cover that for you." And so God provides, and He did. So we raised our support. We then relocated to Asunción. We spent the first couple of years learning the language and spending time trying to understand the culture. We also want to make sure, that we stayed in shape, because you live in a third world country, and there's lots of stories of sick missionaries that wind up having to come home. And so we want to make sure we were in good shape. We did that. Our own spiritual growth, and then as well as becoming closer as a family, and then to journal. And that turned out, instead of journaling, turned out to be our monthly mission reports and Andrea's regular Facebook reports that I know a lot of you were following and enjoyed, and she had fun doing that. So really what we can say in regards to that, then, brethren, it was mission complete. We were able to complete all those things and move forward with our work there in Paraguay. And speaking of that, I remember several times coming back on furlough and reporting, brethren, we have lots of goals. And some of those goals include things like planting a new church. We didn't actually think we'd have that opportunity. We wanted to, but have an opportunity to plant a new church, even have an evangelist that we were going to get full time to come down, as well as supporting a missionary widow. That was something that the Lord presented to us to be able to do. Start up a Bible Academy, evangelistic campaigns, camps and retreats, and so many different things, including remodeling the building and things like that. I remember bringing these down and presenting these to you. This is what we're hoping to do. Well, I'm happy to report, mission complete. We were able to complete almost every single one of the things that we presented as our goals, and including, and I remember this being quite interesting, on one of those posters we put on there to diminish the support of the missionary team. And that got a few people riled up there in Paraguay, because in their mind it was just something that was going to continue. They didn't realize, no, you need to be standing on your own. And so even that now has been completed. And then, whenever we had signed up originally for 5 years, at that 5-year mark, we realized that we really needed to stay longer, because now with this new church plant, we needed to encourage them and help them in their growth, as well as the Bible Academy was going well, and so we had an opportunity to graduate some more students, another class from the Bible Academy, as well as take that opportunity to go out and survey more areas for possible future church plants. Continue in our Bible studies, and continue in preaching, and then eventually transition back to the USA. And we're proud to report that we can also say on that, mission complete. We were able to complete all those things that we wanted to. So overall, from 2009, before we went down, all the way till today, it has always been our goal to add souls, to help, to go out and preach and teach, and so that more souls can be added to the kingdom through that. And that was indeed accomplished. We also wanted to train up the Paraguayans to be their own evangelists, so that they can go out and preach and teach the gospel. And that is exactly what we were able to do. And as well as, by the time we finished our work, to have a congregation that was self-governing, self-propagating, self-sufficient, and self-theologizing. so that they could stand on their own. Because you need to understand that there comes a point where you need to take away the crutches. There comes a point where they need to stand on their own. It's just like somebody who, if you have crutches and you have a broken leg or something, the leg eventually heals. Well, if you keep walking on crutches, even beyond the time the leg is healed, you start weakening that leg. And so if we stayed there, Andrew and I, and all the missionaries, we could stay in Paraguay. There's enough work for many, many years. We could stay for a long time, but it would be at their detriment. They would simply always depend on us and always look to us and always expect us to do the work. And now we have a thriving congregation that is doing it on their own and that they will grow. And so we give God the glory for that. As well as we had the opportunity to plant churches, and there's more that are in the works right now that's taking place, and so we give God the glory for that and excited about that. And we also part of our plans were to appoint elders. Now, that didn't happen. It is still in the process, and it's going to be a longer process. We did a lot of work towards that in that direction, but it wasn't accomplished, but it is at least in the process. So I still believe we can say mission complete on those overall goals of what it is we set out to do going to Paraguay. So Andrea and I are happy to say that we are very content with what the Lord was able to use us to do, with what was accomplished there in His name. He provided the increase, the things that He did. And so we're very thankful, and we thank you for your involvement in this work, because you had a hand in this as well. This is not just Andrew and myself or the other missionaries that were down there doing this work. It's all of us. You sent us, just like the church in Antioch sent Paul and Barnabas, and it is to your account that a lot of this will be applied. And so one day, if you never have the opportunity to go to Paraguay, and one day when we're in heaven, I believe that some Paraguayan might walk up to you and say, thank you very much for sending those missionaries down there. I'm here in heaven with you today because of you. Thank you. So Andrew and I want to say thank you. The Paraguayans would like to say thank you. We just are very appreciative of all the support, the love, the encouragement, and everything that this congregation has done for us. It's sad that this is our last time to do these type of reports, but at the same time we're excited about our future plans, and we're going to continue our work in Paraguay, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. Paraguay is definitely in our hearts. It's a country. It's very interesting. I love talking to people about Paraguay because it has such an eclectic culture and eclectic history that it's just you can't make this stuff up sometimes. I mean, there needs to be more books written about what happened in Paraguay, because I'm telling you, they have a very vibrant, rich, interesting history. And so, even just some simple thing like their sidewalks. It was one of the first things that struck me whenever I went to Paraguay is, here we have beautiful, clean sidewalks for the most part. Not in Paraguay. In Paraguay, you have everything you can imagine, including, as you see these pictures here, obstacles, holes in the ground, and just everything. It's always interesting just trying to walk somewhere. The streets in Paraguay are quite interesting. Here's some pictures for you just to show you the city. And during the Lapacho season, when those trees are blooming, is my favorite time of the year. I don't know somebody has to have taken that on a bright early Sunday morning. That's La Palma there, and usually that thing is packed like the one on the right, which is Mercado Cuatro, and that's a typical scene in Paraguay and Asunción almost any day. There's always lots of movement. Here you can kind of see the architecture, how the streets are, and what the city looks like to some degree. It's got a lot of European influence, a lot of Italian influence. But the streets aren't always so beautiful. In fact, right now, I don't think I've ever seen more potholes in my life than there are in Paraguay right now. And I'm still not over it. I'm still here in the United States, and I constantly have this twitch that I'm expecting another jar from a pothole. And the streets are so smooth here, I'll tell you. It's nice. And one of the things that we learned moving to Paraguay is that when we bought our car, it said we need to have a maintenance. We need to put aside a certain amount of money in our working fund for maintenance. Well, of course, we need to change the oil, we need to change the fluids and stuff. And they said, well, you need to add suspension parts on there as well, because that's another thing you need to change. So great they call them baches, the baches of Paraguay. Here's some more pictures of just looking out over the city, kind of give you an idea what the city itself looks like. Of course, the city is really more is about people than it is buildings. This is one of my favorite pictures from across the river. They're looking back at the city of Asunción. And of course, the famous lapacho trees, that's my favorite of all, is the beautiful trees. In fact, looking right out our window, we have a lapacho tree that whenever it blooms we can see, and just absolutely gorgeous. Part of the flora and fauna of Paraguay is those trees. And they have a lot of beautiful trees. And just the culture in general. You've heard me talk over the years all the different things about their culture, like the dos besos, the two kisses, the foods, the traffic, the public transportation, their music, the world's largest at one time the world's largest hydroelectric dam, and just strange sights. There's always some strange sight that you see every day in Paraguay. And so it's been a very interesting and eventful and adventurous 7 years. Now, every year that I come, I always tell you all the great things that is happening in Paraguay, and always tell you about all these happy things. And it's true; they're all a lot of great things. But they're people just like we are, and they're not perfect. You know, the Lord's church in itself is designed the way Jesus set it up is perfect, but the people that belong to it are not. In fact, you know, that's one of the things about it. The church of Christ is made up of broken and hurt and wounded people. And that's why He invites us to Him. Well, people bring a lot of that with them sometimes. And unfortunately, this last time, since the time I was home, this last year, in 2016 till now, we've been beat up pretty good this last year. And there's some conflict in the congregation that almost resulted in a split. It was a personality conflict, just to boil it down, it was a personality conflict between a student in the Bible school and a prominent member of the church. And it got pretty bad and nasty, and the whole time my job was to simply keep repeating, brethren, we are Christians. We are to reflect Christ in our lives. We need to think like Christ. We need to act like Christ. And so let's treat each other as Christ would treat us. And thanks be to the Lord that everything eventually worked out. And sadly, it took a tragedy to finally bring an end to it. It took a tragedy, and many of you know this, the Paredes family. Man, I thought I could do this without crying, but anyway. Many of you know the story, so I won't repeat the story. But the thing I won't tell you is on that Sunday, we received the news on a Saturday night, and on that Sunday morning, the church came together, and I've never seen anybody, I've never seen so much hugging and loving on each other. And every single man that went to the pulpit to either lead a prayer, lead singing, or do something that is part of his responsibilities that morning, cried. And so it was obviously I apologize, brother, but this is part of being a Christian. And if this world was perfect, and we didn't have to experience things like this, we wouldn't want to go to heaven. That's what heaven is for. It's perfect. And that's why I wanted to tell you this story about Ariel. This is that baptism I showed you earlier. This is a workmate of Hector. And he witnessed Hector's faith during all this. You need to understand that while all this was going on, as terrible tragedy as it was, Hector and Patricia's faith never wavered. And they said, well, God gave us those children, and God blessed us with the short amount of time we had with them. We rejoice in that. And they still to this day, and then watching the church surround them with love. This picture you see on the bottom right there is the dorms that we had out back for the students. The church remodeled that for them and said, you move in there and you stay there as long as you need. And they provided for them. This congregation and many congregations in the United States sent money to them. They received over $30,000. And that's a lot of money for a Paraguayan. And so they bought a new piece of property. They're planning on rebuilding their lives. Well, in this process, Ariel saw all this in Hector. And he had been studying with Hector. And Hector had been teaching him the gospel. And he realized this is the real church right here. And it was through that he was baptized. So just that example from a tragedy. And so that tragedy pulled us out of a major conflict that we had in the church. It also resulted in another soul being added to the kingdom. And now Patricia and Hector are doing much better. They're trying to rebuild their lives. They send their love. They say thank you very much. They wanted us to be sure and let you know that they appreciate all your prayers and ask you to continue praying for them. But they're doing much better and trying to move on with that. So a lot of great things that came out of that, even though it was a tragedy, the things that God can do even with crisis. Now, things worked out and we finally got things taken care of in regards to the Bible Academy. We wound up moving the academy to another location, and these 4 students, Nati and Elvira, Alex and Sabas, continued their studies. And this is a picture of in our new facility. And then in the end of January 28th, the 4 of them finished their studies, the 2-year intensive Bible study program, and graduated. So we now graduated 2 classes from the Asunción Bible Academy, and the brethren from Bear Valley came down to present the diplomas to them, as well as recognizing that the school will be closing for now. And so Keith Kasarjan, who is the director of Foreign Extensions, came down, as well as Bill Stewart, one of the professors there. He taught our last class at the Bible Academy. And Luis Camacho is there, who is our stateside coordinator. All came down to support the school, to support the students, and to help us in this transition and everything. And so right now, the school has been put on hold, but a lot of that, the materials and everything went to San Lorenzo, and San Lorenzo now is having a Saturday school where they're continuing a lot of the education and a lot of the things that we were teaching. And eventually, there's a possibility that the Bible Academy will reopen again sometime in the future. This was the congregational retreat from last year whenever the brethren got together and had their camp. This was actually one of the first retreat that there were no Americans involved in the planning or anything else, and so that was pretty exciting to see that this past year. We continued doing Bible studies. I got this picture because we were at this Bible study, and after it was over, they brought out, it must have been 100 hot dogs, and there was only about 15 of us. And so we ate, I don't know how many hot dogs that night, but it was, that's the Paraguayan hospitality for you. So it was fun, and this wonderful family that just relishes in the Bible. And then we had our end of the year dinner, as usual, but this time it was a little bit different because our brother and sister in Christ, Enrique and Leti Alberta, were moving. They were moving from Asunción to the small town of Pilar. You've heard me mention that name many times. Pilar is one of the places where we're hoping to plant the church, and that is part of their plan. They moved down there for economic reasons as well as what the job that he wants to do, but his plan is to plant the church there, and so we're planning on helping him these next few years and supporting him and somehow by sending down groups to campaign and things like that and helping him with materials and things like that. We had visitors like Ed Temple who came down to visit us this past year. In fact, this picture was taken in Pilar. We went down there to do a survey trip to get some more information in regards to future campaigns that we might be able to do in that city. And we also had Brandon and Jamie Liner come visit us, their family. And yes, they have a very large family. And yes, those are triplets. Tres hijos is how you say that in Spanish. And Brandon came down, Brandon and Jamie, because they are interested in serving as missionaries. And so they came down and met with the congregation and told them, we would like to come to Paraguay and serve as missionaries. Now, we've just talked about how there's a transition. There's no longer a mission team there. He's not coming in to become a continuation of the mission team. He's not coming in even to serve as director of the school or anything. He's coming to serve as a missionary where he's needed. And so it's a very possible likelihood that he might be going to another city or just working in that area with them and possibly involved with the Bible Academy. But having brand new triplets, they need to put that on hold for a couple of years until they can manage the children a little bit more and then possibly move down there. We'll be visiting with them on our trip, on our time home this time, and developing those plans for Jamie and Brandon to go to Paraguay. We also had some weddings. This was a very interesting. Nati Mendoza and Lucho Martinez were married. Now, we were there, and the church was there. Some of you might remember that name, Nati. The whole church was there to visit her and support her, and then Lucho's family was there. We were just there as guests. And a preacher has no say in Paraguay as far as marrying, and not like here in the States, that you have to be married by an official Paraguayan judge. Well, the judge was there, and the bride wasn't. And 2 hours later, the bride finally shows up, and the judge says, "I'm not staying that long." He already left. When she finally gets there, Lucho is all in a panic. What do I do? And so they come up and said, "Troy, would you just say some words? Would you do something?" So, I've done impromptu teaching. I've done impromptu preaching. I've even done impromptu funerals. I don't think I've ever done an impromptu wedding before. Didn't have my Bible or anything, so I pull out my phone, pull it up, 1 Corinthians 13, and try to remember the words and did a impromptu wedding ceremony. Well, that turned out to be a good thing because that had an impression on Lucho. Lucho is not a Christian, and he doesn't really care to go to church and everything, and he told the church that night, he said, "The church saved my wedding." And so now he's much more comfortable with everybody. He's coming to church more often, and I wished I'd have had a little bit more time with him, as I know that he's this close. And so the brethren down there, they'll continue studying with him, and I'm sure that real soon we'll be seeing some pictures of Lucho in the baptismal waters. And then another wedding that took place that we were excited about was Silvina Jimenez. This is sister in Christ for quite some time, and then Marcos, who you saw his baptism just recently. That was a cute wedding because they both met on a camping trip. They love camping so much that they put backpacks on the little models there for the, and it took place out in a place where you go camping, and then the very next day they were off hiking. So boy, they're very serious about their outdoor. We're excited for them. And then part of transitioning back to the States is the goodbyes. And so the San Lorenzo Church of Christ Iglesia de Cristo held a going away dinner for us one night, put up a video and made us all cry for a bunch and everything. And then they presented us this beautiful Paraguayan hammock as a parting gift, and we just enjoyed an evening with them. And then about a month later, the Avenida Sacramento Church of Christ, Iglesia de Cristo, also held a going-away dinner for us and contracted this grill master. Is one of our favorites. His name is Carlos Yegros. He's quite the character, and you see him here after serving up Paraguayan barbecue. Then he pulls out his guitar and he has all these fun songs that he sings and everything. And I think he called me Trevor also. I can't remember. Andrea got serious this past year. I was practicing jiu-jitsu in this gym, and that same gym, one time she came to visit, or pick me up actually, and she noticed that over in the corner they were doing some kind of CrossFit thing, and she got interested in that and asked about it, and it was kickboxing. And so she came up and took a class and just fell in love with it. And so she got her yellow belt. She tested and got her yellow belt. Then she tested and got her orange belt. And the entire time while I'm practicing jiu-jitsu and she's over here doing kickboxing, all my buddies are going, "Now, Troy, you better behave now. You better behave." She, and especially the coach there, that one guy in the black there, you see, he's the one who kept telling me, he says, "She hits hard now. You better behave, son." So it was a lot of fun watching her. Also, I hit a milestone this past year. I reached the 50 or the half-century mark, if you will, and so I wanted to do something special. And Andrea and I took a little vacation, went over to Montevideo, and where their famous steaks that they have over there and stuff, and just spent a couple of days celebrating that. And it's summertime. My birthday's in December, and so here I'm used to being cold. Well, there it's summertime, so we went to the beach. That's why. Another interesting thing that happened for me is my dad was remarried, and so I felt like a stranger in my own house. I was sitting there in my house, and there's all these people I've never met before. But this is a lady that he married. He's actually known her for a long time. She actually used to cut my mother's hair. And so they've known each other a long time, and they decided to be married. And so we're excited for him that they both have companionship. So I'll be going home and meeting I met her just for a few minutes at the wedding, and that was it. So this trip home, I'll be getting to know my, what do you call that, stepmother. That'd be interesting. It was interesting. Moving back to the United States, this is our duplex that we lived in. We were blessed to be able to be there for 7 years. We didn't have to move. Sometimes a lot of the missionaries had issues with the landlords because they're not very fair. They don't treat you right. They don't do things right. I remember Perry had several problems with the landlords and had to move several times. We were blessed to be able to stay in the same place. And so here we're packing up, and there's our car. We actually sold that to Eliezer, the missionary, who's never driven before, so he was all excited about having a car. We had to get rid of a lot of our stuff because it was too expensive to bring it back with us, and so Andrea discovered garage sales, feria de garage, or yard sales, and boy, she just had a blast doing that. I don't know how many of those she had, but there were a lot of garage sales, and we had repeat customers coming back, so it was fun. And then the moving day came, and we had a moving company come in, and they wrapped everything in cardboard. It was the most interesting operation I've ever seen, and then loaded up on that container to bring back. And then we left one Monday morning, flying out. That's the River Paraguay, looking back over Asunción, and so that's the last memory I have of leaving that country. Now, we're not done in Paraguay, even though we're here working we'll be working full time in the Panhandle. With the congregation up there. We are not done with Paraguay. We still have more work to do. In fact, the Margaret Street congregation has said that they're going to allow us to go back to Paraguay, continue our work there. And so one of the main things that we want to focus on is raising up and trying to recruit and develop a mission team to go to Encarnación. Encarnación is a city in the south. You've heard me talk about this before. There's actually work that's taking place right now over in the Ciudad del Este area, so there's going to be a church plant that's going to be taking place over there. Now with Enrique and Pilar, that church plant is going to be taking place, and so we have one more major city, and that is Encarnación. Here you can see a picture of it and where it's located, and so we're hoping that between perhaps Brandon and his family and another American family and some Paraguayans, we can form a mission team in the next couple of years. They'll be able to go there and plant the church, and we'll be able to help them and support them getting established and getting things going in that city. And the best part about this, here's a Google map. You can see Encarnación there on the left, but across the river is an even larger city in Argentina called Posadas. And so we have several million precious souls that need to hear the gospel in that part of the world. And so we're going to be recruiting and traveling down there to try to get the church planted in that city over the next few years as part of our work. And so these are some of the things that are happening in Paraguay. Once again, I want to say thank you to this congregation, to the elders who had the foresight to take on our support, to all of the members who prayed for us, who gave of your means for us to be able to be there, for your encouragement and everything, to the preachers for supporting us and talking about us, for everybody that was involved. And again, this goes to your account, as Paul says in Philippians 4. And so we thank you, we love you. It is sad that this is our last mission report, but at the same time, we're excited about what the Lord has to offer. I don't know how much more time we have, but okay, thank you.